Hi, everyone. Paul Modderman with Boring Enterprise Nerds. We did a story a few weeks ago in our AI newsletter about Vianai Systems, who was founded by Vishal Sikka, who used to be the CTO at SAP. So he kind of has that enterprise connection to our interests. Well, after we ran that story, I actually had a chance to sit down and talk with Dr. Sanjay Rajagopalan, who is the Chief Design and Strategy Officer at Vianai Systems. And we had a great talk. We talked about empathy in AI product design. We talked about truth and verification against hallucinations that Vianai is looking at. And we talked about enterprise strategy for large language models and other generative AI as Vianai goes to marketplace with these things. It was a great conversation. I loved it. I think you will too. Without further ado, here it is. So, like along those lines, can you tell me a little bit about your sort of personal journey from I guess how you went to IIT, like all the way back to like get us up to the story and stop where you currently are, and we'll dive deeper on that. But tell us the Sanjay epic.
Yeah, I try not to ramble on about my past because I'm old enough that I can go on for hours. So, but yes, I do have a tech background. I went to IIT in Delhi. I came to the US to pursue a master's program in
Uh-huh.
mechanical engineering. I did mechanical engineering in design systems. At that time at Austin, design systems usually meant, building systems which had like automatic controls in them, mechanical design of mechanical products. So after my master's, I worked for a few years in the automotive industry. I was in the heavy earth moving industry, designing transmissions and pumps and so on for Caterpillar, which is a large earth moving company. I was in Peoria, Illinois for 2 years. It was my
Mhm.
first experience ever being in snow. So it was quite a kind of a cultural adaptation for me. And also being in like a blue collar town and far away from the east or the west coast, I
Mhm.
thought that was an interesting experience in my life. But it did, enable me to, when I applied for a PhD, get recruited into one of the top PhD programs in product design, which is the Stanford Design
Mhm.
Program.
Mhm.
And I did my PhD here. It was prior to the design school, and I know you are also familiar with the kind of the design, the importance of design,
Yep.
and of course SAP as such was at that time Hasso had just funded the D School,
The
what's
D
now
school.
called the Hasso-Plattner Institute of
Yeah.
Design at Stanford. And I was graduating at that time. And as I was graduating, a couple of friends and I decided to found a company. And we did that for a while until it didn't work out. I mean, it's the dot-com bust, and it was hard to get anyone to pay attention to kind of enterprise software idea because a lot of companies were going out of business at that time. So we ended up selling that company, and I joined SAP. And I was at SAP for about 10 years. I
Mhm.
worked in the design services team, and I also ran several advanced projects for Hasso. And Vishal, who happened to be also a Stanford alum.
Mhm.
I had gotten to know him in the early days of my startup. We got introduced through common friends. He
Mhm.
was an advisor to my startup. And so when I joined SAP, I eventually started working very, very closely with Vishal and Hasso. And
Mhm.
then when Vishal left to become the CEO of Infosys, I
Mhm.
followed him there. And then since then, we've been working together from the SAP days through
Mhm.
Infosys, through this startup. He's the CEO of the startup, and I joined him at
Yep.
the startup as well. So that, in a nutshell, I've been in the area of technology, product design. I've been in the area of now for 4 years, AI and machine learning. But
Right.
in general, I'm kind of a product design guy.
You're a product design guy. So, because that's one of the things I was going to ask you too is like, when does your AI journey start? Right. And is that kind of your current role is kind of where that journey starts, or does that go back further?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have a background like an academic background in
Sure.
AI.
Yeah.
My PhD is in design,
Yep.
and the good thing about design is it is very assimilative, right? Because
Mm.
it's about a way of thinking, and it's about the way of approaching problems and solutions, right? And
Right.
it turns out that it works really well, especially in ambiguous areas which are just developing. And AI as such has been a very, it's an old field,
Mhm.
but the recent advancements have made it a new field again, right? It's completely changed with, the neural networks and then now the transformer technology and
Yeah.
so on. So even in the last 6 months, it has completely taken on a new flavor.
Yeah.
And it turns out a designful mindset, which is a kind of what I've trained on, is pretty
Mhm.
good at trying to, kind of put your frame around all of that and trying to understand it in a way that I can explain to other people. So I'm not a deep technologist when it comes to AI. We have amazing people in our
Yeah.
company,
Sure.
including Vishal, Naveen,
Yeah.
our CTO, and others who are extremely deep on the technology side.
Mhm.
My role is primarily to match that or mix that with kind of business solutions. I bring the empathetic, customer-centric perspective and see how something like this can be made practical in a real enterprise context. It's really
I
that glue role.
Yeah, so I'm glad you said empathy because it's a word I use a lot. And it's a word that actually in the last probably 5 or 6 years for myself too, that has kind of matured in its own tendrils in my head, I suppose. And the reason I say that is like from one standpoint, having either run or participated in some design thinking workshops, of course, empathy is central to that process. But I also think if I sort of lift my brain off to space a little bit here too, like I also think empathy is kind of, how do I put this? It is the central thing of ethics and morality, right? It is like the capacity to place yourself outside of yourself is the heart of what makes uh, us and animals like us able to reason about what is good and what is just and what is right. And so when you join that with, and I'm just going off on a topic here, but I'll come back. I'll ask you a question here, I promise. When you join that with like what businesses are trying to do in their marketplaces and what people are trying to do in terms of their businesses doing that stuff, it's a powerful thing. So tell me more about your current role and how you sort of like inject that design mentality into like a very A, really techy, but B, like exploding space right now of Gen AI and all the stuff that Vianai is into these days.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful question, even though, you took a while to describe what was on your mind. It's a beautiful word, empathy, and you have a nuanced understanding of it. That's clear from the way in which you described it, right? And, I do feel that, the way I think of it is, people often can tell you, uh, you know, say something, or you can kind of watch them doing something, but you need to get into their minds and their hearts to really understand what would work for them. Sometimes you have to see the invisible, and the way you see the invisible is to put yourself in other people's shoes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they are feeling a pain or they're feeling a frustration, and you need to be able to see that frustration and then imagine something that doesn't exist today, which
Mm,
could potentially eliminate that pain or that frustration. And designers get very good at doing that almost as a second nature, because
sure.
they have the training to kind of really their radar is very you could say sophisticated on things like body language, the way
Mm,
people use language, etc. Now, coming to why that becomes super relevant, especially in the design for AI, in the recent advances in AI, is that it's all about language. And language is one of the most kind of human things we know. And that's one of the reasons why when machines are really good at language, people start kind of attributing human characteristics to those machines,
yeah.
right? You kind of start thinking that because it can speak well, or you can write, type well or write well, whatever you want to
Hmm.
say.
Yeah.
These machines therefore must have feelings and they must have emotions. And then humans engage with those machines to which they attribute human qualities in a completely different way than a machine which does not have those qualities, right? So if I was kind of using a lawnmower which doesn't have any of the language capabilities, versus I engage with ChatGPT, I immediately engage with these machines in a different way, right? So the question really comes for a designer is that once you have that kind of, way in which people automatically put trust in systems that are articulate from a language standpoint, it becomes easy to betray that trust, because it's kind of so inherent in us that when something speaks to us very articulately, very confidently, and very knowledgeably, we attribute human qualities to it, and then we give it the typical respect that we accord to any knowledgeable, confident, articulate human being, right?
That's exactly right. I find myself like, I am so polite to Chat GPT. And on one angle, it's like, why? But on the other angle, I don't know if you've seen this, there's research that has shown that like more polite prompts get better responses. And I think that you can kind of feel that, like, okay, that's baked into human language and that's what it's trained on, right? So you can kind of see how that might evolve that way. But like, I didn't even think of it. It just emerged from my fingers, right? The please and thank you. Like, why did I do that before I even realized what it was, right? It's an amazing
And
design
that's a
perspective,
good
right?
thing. That's a good thing, because you are now you're kind of drawn to this thing, but at the same
Yeah.
time, it's an easy thing to take advantage of, and it's easy to fall into that trap because the machine does not have any intent to really do right by you. It's
Yeah.
doing it because it has been designed by people to behave that way, right? And so it's easy to fall into that trap, and then you might, I don't know if you have, but 15 minutes after using ChatGPT, I did have a sense of betrayal. And the betrayal was, it was so good, and yet it was so wrong, right? In
Right.
that it was making mistakes that,
Yeah.
people would never make. And so it's like you are in this kind of, you feel that you're in this split world where you have a super intelligent person you're speaking with who's just crazy.
That's exactly right. And it's that weird sense of like, sometimes when you're talking to somebody and you realize they are not following what you're saying at all, like every now and
Yeah.
again that cracks through the any Chat GPT like system these days, right? And so
Right.
like that gets me kind of interested too, especially one of Vianai's new things out there, relatively new, I should say, is your enterprise chatbot focused on finance. So draw a line for me for like the design and strategy and into Gila on that stuff.
Yeah, one of the key enterprise applications which this technology enables is that you can talk to anything. And what is anything? Well, it could be documents. So you can
Yep.
ask documents questions. And in fact, that's what ChatGPT is. It's kind of like taken every document in the world. It has seen it. It's seen most of the web. It has seen all of Wikipedia. It has seen all of the published books in the world and so on. And it has somewhere in its system internalized all of that. And when you ask a question, it's trying to answer using things that it has seen before, but it doesn't want to be too predictable. So they throw in a little bit of randomness. They call it temperature.
Temperature, yeah.
And then the problem that happens with that is every once in a while, it goes off the rails, and then that's called hallucination, right? So
Yeah.
basically, it's the system is trying to be as human as possible, and in trying to be human, sometimes it becomes kind of crazy. So what we realized very early on is for enterprise use cases, the kinds that we were seeing companies interested in, out of the box, these systems are not going to work, don't work today, and are not going to ever work without a lot of other components that don't exist today, right? And we saw that as an opportunity. We said, hey, there's a gap between what you need and what these systems bring to the table. And we started identifying specific components which were repeatedly required across all different use cases that we were seeing as we talked to people about the kinds of things they wanted to do with this system, which it was capable of doing, but not without a lot of additional effort, not just out of the box.
Yeah.
And so we created something we call Gila Enterprise. It's not just for finance. Finance is one of the things that we feel is a very near-term use case because it's very effective. Our platform can be used for any type of documents, any type of data in the backend, any type of system in the backend. What it really is the ability to convert what is a conversational request or a query into something that actually responds to that in a secure, accurate, and cost-effective way. And that last part is very important, because what most people don't realize is these massive language systems from OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, and others are extremely expensive to build and expensive to run. And if you're sending it queries, like, you can think of it as it's a massive, massive system which costs a lot of money every time you ask it a question. And the fact that they're cheap today are just an artifact of the fact that these are like venture funded companies where people are throwing billions of dollars into it, and that will go away and the true cost will emerge at some point. So it doesn't make sense, even from a cost standpoint, to use such an expensive model for each and every type of question that you might have in an enterprise. You might want to have custom built, smaller, purpose built, specific, fine-tuned, private, secure, and accurate language models for a specific task. So we see a future where these large models built by these big companies are going to have a role to play. But in reality, each company, each enterprise is going to have dozens, hundreds, maybe even 1,000 purpose-built large language models that they use for specific tasks. And to be able to manage these, the life cycle of these, to be able to make sure that they're accurate, are not hallucinating, tracking them, in terms of drifting away, tracking the performance. All of these are going to be, needs, and our platform brings those needs to the table, brings those components to the table that serve that need.
So I like that. And I'm assuming there's some kind of retrieval augmented generation or something like that built into these things that is pulling those documents through. That's really cool. I signed up and tried it out. I was asking about like Tesla's earning reports and stuff like that.
So what you saw was Gila.ai. Gila.ai is our showcase application built on top of our enterprise platform.
Oh, okay.
And that Gila.ai, and anyone can go, all of your audience, I encourage you to go to Gila.ai, HILA.ai. You can sign up, it's free to use. And it's built around this investor use case where you can research companies based upon their earnings transcripts, their SEC. You can also upload your own PDF documents and ask any question that you want. But that is not the application we sell to enterprises. We sell a platform which has the capabilities, which has enables you to build such applications for your purpose, which could be in finance, it could be in supply chain, contracts, and so on. But Gila is a great way for people to get a demonstration of the type of applications that could be built by the enterprise on top of our Gila enterprise platform.
Okay, that's a great decision, and thank you for that too. One of the commenters on the issue I put out a week or two ago said that they were having trouble understanding what Vianai was up to with this stuff. So hearing that is I'm very glad you said that, because that helps me sort of cement that in my own head too. So along the line of hallucinations and things like that, and data verification, that kind of stuff, I also saw very recently, that word is tuned in my head now, very LLM, right? An open source tool with its own kind of set of mechanisms and processes for helping builders, enterprises, whoever, do that level of hallucination mitigation, I guess you could say. Tell me more about the development of that and kind of what your plans are for that side of the house.
Absolutely, yes. So, I mean, the need for that comes from what we're hearing from our customers, right? They are saying, hey, this thing is great. What these language models are doing is great, but we see a lower amount of effort being put in by these companies to do the kinds of verifications. Is this thing actually telling the truth? And give us that information in a very, what you could say, visual way, right? Give it back to us right there. So the very LLM effort is really something we realized we can make a start, but we do need community participation in order to really get it right. So open sourcing it was the right thing to do. It is something that will be a core part of the platform that we provide for our customers, but we do want to solicit broad participation in defining it and how do you verify something? Because today, in today's world, when there is, people are very skeptical if you tell them that there is just one source of truth, right? People are like, according to whom? And
Yeah.
so what it is a very general capability that given a context, so if you say, I give you the context of Wikipedia, and then I use a large language model, it gives me an answer, but according to Wikipedia, how accurate is it? So it's able to compare what the language model is putting out versus what's there in an independent source. Of course, the Wikipedia has been used to train the language model itself, but the language model is subject to hallucination, right? So what you can do is now you can do something like, hey, can you tell me how close is what the language model is saying to what is actually contained in Wikipedia? Now you can
Semantic
swap
similarity,
out,
right? Yeah.
yeah, kind of like a distance calculation. How
Yeah.
far away is what it's saying from what is there in Wikipedia? Now, you can swap out Wikipedia for the Encyclopedia Britannica if you
Yeah.
have access to that. You could swap out that with your own private corpus of truth. You could say, here's everything we consider to be true. It's our HR and benefits document, and we don't want the system to be saying anything that's not contained within this document. It could be, a whole bunch of policies or standard operating procedures, and say, hey, I don't want this LLM to be answering in a way which is inconsistent with my standard operating procedures. So you could swap out that source of truth with your favorite source of truth, right? Whatever that is. And now you can say, I want the language model, every time it says something, I want each sentence to be ranked as to how close it is to my source of truth, right? Now, it's a simple idea, right? So language models are saying stuff, people are believing it, taking it for, just literally for what it's worth. But if you had a way to say, well, according to Wikipedia, this is correct. According to Wikipedia, this is incorrect, or we are unable to verify it, well, that could be valuable. So that's the system we put out there. It doesn't say, we don't claim that Wikipedia is the source of truth. We are saying it's one source
How
of truth.
close, right?
Yeah, it's one source of truth. You could swap it out for anything, but it's really a verification. That's why the very LLM, but with a Y, VERY LLM.ai. So yeah, please go try it out. It is, what you see at the website is just a sample. It's a very simple sample. We put that. The real value is in going and downloading the source code and working on it and trying to make it better and critiquing it, giving us feedback. We have a team working on it. And so we hope that will become a kind of key thing that people start focusing on. It's not just generating, but also providing the tools that help people understand how good it is based upon their standards and their requirements.
Interesting. Okay, thank you for that. I'll put a little link of that in the show description here too.
Sure.
So I want to also, because a couple of my readers and even myself too, just want to sort of understand more, what other little bits and pieces is Vianai up to these days that you can share with us?
Well, so as I said, our core platform is Gila Enterprise. And what we have is a bunch of technology components which we think will be needed repeatedly to build robust, secure, accurate, and cost-effective solutions which use language models, not just one language model, multiple language models as the core driving engine, right? So that's our overall purview. Within that, you can think of it as having multiple things that you can do. You could take the prompts, and even before you send it to the language model, you can process the prompts. You can classify them, you can sanitize them, you could check if there are attempts to jailbreak, you can prompt engineer it, which is adding something before the prompt in terms of context or after the prompt, these kinds of things, so that you get better, more accurate results. And so the first bunch of tools is how can you make prompts even better than they are? And you can do a lot even before you get to the language model just by looking at the prompt and process the prompt to do a better job, right? So there's a bunch of tools that you have which are repeatedly used in multiple use cases. So we provide those. The second is, like I said, we believe in the future where there's not a single monolith of a language model. We believe that every prompt probably goes to a different language model based upon which language model is best suited to respond to that query, right? Or that request, a generative request, or whatever it is. And so I think there is a step that goes from, hey, this is what I'm asking, to who should I ask it to, or which language model should I be asking that question too. So that's what we call orchestration. So there is some amount of, deciding that which language model. And of course, once you say I have 1,000 language models per company, well, who's building those 1,000 language models per company? Well, there's some fine tuning required. Maybe it starts off with a smaller open source model. Maybe it's Llama 2. Maybe it's the Plan stuff. There are just so many open source options. Some of them are smaller models, some of them pretty large models. And so you need the ability to manage all of that for your company. So there is a lot of language model lifecycle management. We call that LLM ops. You may want to decide which is the right language model, but once you start using it, you may want to monitor it, track it, making sure that the right prompt is going to the right model. If a model is not behaving well, maybe for a type of prompt, you might want to swap it out for a different model. So there's a bunch of just monitoring, operational, managing lifecycle management tools for the suite of language models that you need to have in order to do all of this well. So that's the second category where we provide tools. The third one is once the language model spits out something, and by the way, it's not only spitting out text, sometimes it's spitting out images, sometimes it's spitting out code. It's actually really good at writing code. You might want to take a look at what it came up with and then have either a human or another system evaluate how good that output is. Like this kind of verification thing I was talking about, you might want to have it verify against a source of truth. You might want a human to look at it. They call that, RLHF, and, rate it as to how good that output is, and then send it back if the quality is poor and so on. So there's a bunch of post-processing that happens after that. And there's tools that companies need to do all of that. So if you buy into this vision that every company is going to have a suite of language models, they're going to have a bunch of use cases. They're going to have tools across all of these use cases to do pre-processing, manage the lifecycle of these language models, track them, observe them, monitor them, as well as constantly monitor the output to improve the quality of the output, eliminate toxic content, and over time get to a point where the output is very, very highly reliable, free of hallucination, all of that stuff. Then they need a bunch of tools that sit on top and around the language model in order to achieve that. And that's what we are building.
Okay. Thank you for that. That really helps me clarify in my own end, and I hope hopefully for listeners and readers too. If it's all right with you, I'd love to also sort of like maybe float above Vianai itself a little bit and talk about some of the things that some of the stuff that I've heard, especially Vishal Sikka, your CEO and friend.
My boss.
My boss,
my friend, my CEO. Yes.
Yeah. And like you said earlier, over multiple companies and iterations, right? So one thing he talked about that I really appreciated his perspective, and I'd love to get your perspective too, is that there's this both people and physical resource gaps here in the AI space, especially generative AI space, right? Where there is certainly less than 1 million, probably less than 100,000 people in the entire world who could like rebuild it without extra other people doing it, right? That level of knowledge is so small, and it's very concentrated too, right? In nations and places that have the resources to have that stuff. What's your vision, or what's Vianai's vision, or any mix thereof, of like how do we fix that? How do we make the world better from that perspective?
Yeah, I mean, and this is something that's very close to the heart of Vishal, even before Vianai. It's something that he championed along with his wife, Vandana Sikka, who's on the board of Code.org. She ran the Infosys Foundation. And really something that Vishal has been driving for most of his professional life, which is that in general, technology and literacy, as it comes to kind of computational literacy with technology, is at levels which are kind of very, very low. And there are the haves and the have-nots. Especially with AI, it's exacerbated because it's a very, very, it needs a lot of resources to even build these models. Only a few people are able to get beyond the superficial use of these to really being able to make a change or drive the way in this thing moves. So it becomes more and more an exclusive club. And it is something that we do in terms of making sure that when, of course, Vishal gives a lot of talks, and you can see if you just go and Google him, all of his recent talks,
Yep.
He has made a big point about the fact that governments, companies, eminent folks need to invest more to bringing up the knowledge about these systems. Everyone should have an opportunity to benefit from this. And where we have we have tried to really make a difference here is to partner with certain organizations. I had mentioned code.org before, but we also work closely with an organization called Technovation.
Mhm.
We are one of the funders of Technovation, and others who are working effectively. Vishal is also an advisor to people in governments, the Indian government, where there's a massive, massive population of people who may be one of the have-nots, right?
Yeah.
The people who don't have access or the ability to drive where this technology goes. So it isn't kind of a core part of our business, because we are trying to bring a platform technology to enterprises,
Yeah.
but bringing that education, from let's say just a few tech companies to have a larger participation by all companies, right? In itself is a hard task, because right now the concentration is only with the big tech companies where they have most of the talent. And when we go to our customers, they're like, well, we find it hard to even hire people to help us with this. And so we service the advisors and we provide the tools. But even beyond that, our effort is to support those organizations which are working at the grassroots in terms of education, in terms of enablement, in terms of access, and to the extent a startup can help them through funding so that this problem is solved for humanity, so to speak.
That's okay. I appreciate that. Thank you for speculating or helping me, even though Vishal's not here, like helping explicate some of that perspective there too. I appreciate that. So I have one more thing, and I do a podcast with my boss at work, disconnected from this stuff here. And I always end with a certain question. And I think I still want to ask that question, even though this isn't my work podcast or whatever. And that question is, what gets you excited about the future?
Well, there's a lot to be concerned about.
Sure.
So, if you just focus on what's to be concerned about, it's kind of very bleak, right? So
Right.
I do think everyone should make an effort to kind of see the silver lining, right? There's kind of, in fact, I think yesterday there was an article in the New York Times about, the three, or maybe it was today, about the three camps, like the doomsdayer camp and the people who want to do the right thing, and those who are the warriors who want to kind of charge ahead and so on. Like, there's these three camps and all of them want power or something like that. I do think there's some truth in that, but there's also, I think, this thing that all of us grapple with every time we have a technology that can be, kind of have very positive influence, but also very dangerous, right? I think that AI has those qualities, right? So immediately you can say, hey, in the hands of the wrong people, this technology can really be misused. And we've already talked about how good it is at misinformation and manipulating people. I don't think that there is any near-term possibility that this thing takes on some kind of, consciousness and becomes, space lasers or something like
Skynet
that.
or something.
Yeah, I think that feels, when I look at ChatGPT, I don't see that. I don't see how it takes over that. But I do think people are working on making it bigger and bigger until it could have that capability. I do think that in the hands of the wrong human actors, a technology which has these capabilities can be misused and then have a really detrimental impact. So I think that the right way to look at it is focus on all the things where the positive effects will far, far, far outweigh all of the negative things. Make sure that the controls exist, the regulations, and companies are brought to understand the value of thinking about it holistically versus just pure profit taking on all of this. And that's where kind of some of the design thinking comes in, is that, hey, take a look at it more holistically, be more empathetic, more understand how this impacts people's lives, and consider that in the way you build products. So more people emphasizing the need to do that, more people working on the positive things where things can actually be improved with AI. We call it
Mhm.
human-centered AI, as
Mhm.
basically what we think of as AI as a partner to humans to make, you amplify the impact that humans can have in a good way.
Mhm.
And so focusing on that part to me is very exciting. It's only once or twice in a lifetime that these type of technologies come along, and it's our moment. So those of us who are here have the opportunity to engage with it, shape it, build it, and potentially actually have an impact. So I think that that's super exciting.
Yeah.
And I feel that balances out all the kind of the negative
Mm.
thoughts that happen when you think, oh my goodness, what if it
Right.
goes the wrong way?
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you very much. Um, is there anything else you'd like to plug?
Well, like I said, Hila.ai, I would love for everyone who listens to this podcast to create an account on Hila.ai, check it out, and give us our feedback, what you feel about it. Watch us as we grow and build this company. And of course, veryllm.ai. We do think it's an important part of human-centered AI to have those kinds of capabilities. So if you're the type who wants to contribute, wants to be involved, please go there and be part of that community. Any of these things would be wonderful to have you, and looking forward to working together with all of your listeners in this exciting time.
Okay. Well, Sanjay, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. To everyone listening or watching, go check out what Sanjay said, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks, guys.